All right, friends, today you are reading your first romantic poem. So this is called The Tide Rises, The Tide Falls by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I'm going to help you a little bit with the annotations of this. There are study guide questions on the second doc, so just make sure you don't forget to do those, okay? Let's read it first. The tide rises, the tide falls, the twilight darkens, the curlew calls. Along the sea sands, damp and brown, the traveler hastens towards the town. And the tide rises, the tide falls. Darkness settles on roof and walls, but the sea in darkness calls. The little waves with their soft white hands efface the footprints in the sands, and the tide rises, the tide falls. The morning breaks, the steeds in their stalls stamp and neigh as the hostler calls. The day returns, but nevermore returns the traveler to the shore, and the tide rises, the tide falls. All right, so our annotation guide is over here. Again, make sure you're completing all of this. First, you're doing your rhyme scheme. So hopefully you remember from our Puritan period how to do that. So we're going to look at our last words, right? The first one falls, we'll get an A. Calls rhymes with falls, so that will also get an A. Brown is a new rhyme. That does not rhyme with falls or calls, so that will get a B. Town rhymes with brown, so that gets a B as well. And then we have falls again, so that gets an A. We move on, right? We have walls, that's an A, rhymes with falls and calls. Calls again, so that gets an A. Hands is a new one. It does not rhyme with calls or brown, so that will get a C. Same thing, sands rhymes with hands, so that gets a C. And then falls gets an A again. Try to do that last stanza completely on your own, okay? Number 2 is asking for imagery. So our sense of sound in blue, our sense of sight in green, our sense of touch in orange. So let's first look for something that we can hear. I'm just looking for one. Here's one. The curlew calls. This is like a little seabird. I'm imagining him like whistling, making, bird sounds. Appeals to our sense of sight in green. So what is something you can see? Hopefully you're seeing this darkness. And again, please give me more than just what we're going over today. So we'll highlight that green. And then our sense of touch. So I don't know if you noticed this, right? Our sand is damp. You should be able to feel that. So that would be orange. Again, there are many more examples of imagery, so feel free to annotate this further. Okay. Number 3 is asking for repetition. So we're going to highlight that in yellow. I'm sure you've noticed when I read this that they keep repeating. The tide rises, the tide falls. The tide rises, the tide falls. 2 more times here. Okay, highlight personification in pink. One big one that I notice and that I think is pretty important is the little waves with their soft white hands efface the footprints in the sand. Some people don't know what that word efface means. So just imagine being at a beach and you're walking on the sand and you leave that footprint in the sand. Then what happens when your wave comes atop of your footprint, right? That gets erased. So that's what that word efface means. Number 5 is asking, like, what do you think the footprints might be representing? Hopefully, today's little journal question prompted you into thinking of this. The waves are the footprints are supposed to be symbolizing the impact you make in the world. So based on what happens to your footprint, right, it gets washed away with the wave. Longfellow is suggesting in this poem that we really don't have a huge impact in the world, right? We live, we're here, we die, and then we're kind of forgotten about. So he makes that point like human life is very temporary. Notice the repetition here. Even after in stanza 3, notice our man never returns to the shore. So you can assume, right, our man has died, but the tide rises, the tide falls. Nature is still continuing, right? Nature is forever, while man is just very temporary and short lived. As you read this, I do kind of want you to notice in each stanza, right? So we have morning here, then we have night, or I'm sorry, we have twilight, then we have night, then we have the morning again. So it does kind of change times of day in each stanza. If you have any questions about the rest of this poem, please let me know. I'm happy to help you. Again, don't forget these 6 questions at the bottom.